Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar with ICNA CSA, ICNA Council for Social Justice. Today we'll be speaking about the forced cremation of Muslims and Christians in Sri Lanka. The country has a history of persecuting minorities, particularly Muslims, for a long time now. They have now used the COVID crisis as a basis to deny Muslims and Christians the right to bury their loved ones according to their own religious laws, which is a violation, of course, of freedom of religion. So today we have two Sri Lankan activists who are doing tremendous amounts of work on this front. And they'll be sharing some of their thoughts with us and what's happening in Sri Lanka now and how we can help. So our first speaker is going to be Lukman Haris from England. He's joining us right now today live from England. He is a UK-based writer, author, and political commentator of Sri Lankan heritage. And he is also a human rights activist, and he was a trustee and a director of UK-based organization called Alliance for Cohesion and Racial Equality, which supports victims of racism. So he's going to be our first speaker, and he's going to be talking about the forced cremation from the human rights perspective. So Brother Lukman Haris, please take the mic. Please take the floor.
Alhamdulillah, assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, Muhammad Abdullah, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, friends in humanity. Really happy and delighted to see such amount of global interest in supporting the battle for burial rights of Muslims and Christians in Sri Lanka. I am reminded of the saying by Martin Luther King, who said that injustice anywhere will be a threat to justice everywhere. So that's a very important saying by Martin Luther King, very much known figure in US and all over the world. And what he meant was, what affects one directly affects all indirectly. So in that respect, I must thank the ICNA, or the Islamic Center of North America, for organizing this great webinar. And let me give you some perspective to this problem of forced cremation in Sri Lanka. Now you see, this 1 year on, after the corona crisis almost, compulsory cremation has been a nightmare for the Muslims of Sri Lanka and also for Christians. Now, government initially in March, they actually allowed both options, the burial option as well as the cremation option, for all those who die out of this corona pandemic virus. So so that was how it was. Then the first person died, and he wasn't a Muslim. But then in late March, the first Muslim died in a place called Negombo. Negombo, I'm sure those people who may not know about the geography in Sri Lanka, is a Catholic stronghold where most of the victims of last year's Easter bomb attack actually were from. And there were a lot of uneasiness in that area. So in that area, one of the Muslim brothers died. And at that time, the rule was that both options were allowed. The cremation as well as the burial option. That was how the government regulation stood at that time. But unfortunately, for some reason, after he died, there are a lot of underhand things were going on under the under the surface, and all of a sudden they decided that this person has to be cremated. That was against the wishes of the family, as well as a lot of efforts were done by the community leaders to find a space to bury him. But even then, they did not, care about this, and the first person died. And they changed. After that, a week later, they passed amendment to this law to say that only cremation is allowed. That means mandatory cremation policy came into being. Now, to give you some figures, now as at now, we have about 244 people, as at the latest figures, corona victims, out of which more than half, about 150, are believed to be Muslims. Why I say believed is, the figures are not known. the government is not releasing in the ethnic, the breakdown is not, breakup is not available. But then the figures are very much correct, because according to the people who are in the know. Now we must consider the fact that Sri Lanka is out of a 21 million population, 10% are Muslims. But disproportionately, the people who are dying from coronavirus is more than 50%, which does not seems a reasonable figure. Now, let me take about 3 cases. You know, the 4 cases I want to do, but first case I already dealt with. That is the first case who died, and that person from Nigambo died without the wishes against the wishes of the family, and he was cremated. And that actually opened up a can of worms, and a lot of efforts were done to correct the situation. But then everything fell on deaf ears. Now let me take through 3 cases out of these 150 odd cases. It's just to show how indifferent, insensitive the government of Sri Lanka is to the wishes of the family, the aspiration of the family to give a fair burial or a send off to their loved ones who die out of this coronavirus. One is a 44-year-old Fatima Rinoza. She died actually. She was admitted to the hospital, and after few hours, she died, and they said that she was tested positive, and as a result, the body was not given to the family, and she was forcefully cremated, and then the ashes were given in a pot or an urn to the family. Now, sometime later, they said that the results were not correct, and she has actually died not out of corona. So my question is this, my dear brothers and sisters: who will take responsibility for this willful and tragic negligence? Who will actually turn these ashes into flesh and bones, so that they can be buried the way it should have been? But unfortunately, it did not happen. So this is a very, very tragic and heartbreaking news for not only for the family, but for the whole community as well. Then we have the second case of Muhammad Fahim and Fatima Shafna. Actually, they were blessed with a baby after about 6 years after marriage. So they were so waiting for the arrival, and he was born on in November 18th, and on the 7th of December, actually the baby fell sick, baby shake, and he was taken to the main hospital, children's hospital. And few days later, on the 7th of December, they noticed that he had corona, and he was tested for corona. But the interesting fact is, both parents, the mother and the father, were tested negative, and there were loads of things that were they were expressing. There were a lot of doubts cast on this, and unfortunately, again, this 20-day-old baby was cremated, and that, of course, started off a wave of protest across the island. They actually even melted the hearts of the majority of the population as well, which led to a lot of protests, like tying the white cloth on the main cemetery in Colombo. So that was a development that happened because of this unfair cremation of this 20-day-old baby. Right. Then the last one, which I want to tell you, is the irony. This chap is a Muslim man who actually was a grave digger, and he was a grave digger because he was doing that service as a service, not as a livelihood. He was helping in digging graves in his own area. But unfortunately, this man too died recently, and it was the irony that a person who has been dedicating his life, leisure time to help people, to bury, he was also contracted corona, and then unfortunately he was cremated as well. So these are the few things that I want to bring to your notice to give you idea of what type of heartbreaking development this forced cremation policy is. Now, at first glance, you might think that this is a very fair policy because the government keep on insisting that it is fair to everyone. We are not only cremating the Muslims, but only everyone we are cremating whoever who dies of coronavirus. Yeah, upon it might seem fair, but if you see closer inspection, you will see that it is not true. And for one thing, it has no scientific or medical basis. For the second one, it actually it is part of a racist agenda. Now, let me tell you at this instance one of the allegations, directed against the community. Why are Muslims so unreasonable? Why are Muslims so unpatriotic? Because why are they complaining about a piece of policy which is applying to everyone alike? Only you community is complaining. Why the question is this? It's true that the corona pandemic upended, the funeral rituals of all faiths and even Muslims as well. And as we all know that Muslims have 4 essential rights for a dead person. One is someone dies, the community is actually, there's a duty of the community to do 4 important rites. One is, of course, the washing of the body. Second one is the shrouding of the body, kafan. The third one is praying for the soul of the dead person. Fourth one is, of course, the burial that is, has become a bone of contention. Now, because of medical reasons, the scholars gave a very clear ruling on this. Both the bathing and the shrouding of this were dispensed with, were given up. They gave up those 2 essentials because there was medical evidence to say that it is posing a risk. Now, why Muslims are asking for burial is because there is no such risk as per the WHO, the World Health Organization guidelines, which is not, devised, just for the sake of it. It's done after thorough research by world experts. And also, as I would come back to you in a minute, there have been a lot of other studies which have proved that the burial option is relatively safe. So therefore, there is no, evidence for, the risk of burial. So therefore, we are asking for it because there is no, and also over 190 countries have been following, including the countries which are about the same type of geography or the the climate conditions like Sri Lanka or even worse. So even the neighboring Maldives, which is just a group of islands, even they are burying their dead victims. So my question is this: so what is happening in Sri Lanka then? My contention is that having no medical or scientific basis, it is nothing but it is state sanctioned discrimination or racism. Clearer terms, it's more state sanctioned Islamophobia. So why, you might ask, why am I saying like that? I would say 4 reasons. One is this, what is happening by way of forced cremation is not just flash in the pan policy. it did not happen now. It is but part of a well orchestrated, well planned hate campaign against the Muslims, which actually started specifically. Now it was there earlier as well, but the tempo increased after the end of the war in Sri Lanka against the Tamil Tigers. Tamils are, as you know, is the biggest minority in Sri Lanka, and they had lot of grievances, and they were not addressed by the government, and therefore some of the youths took to arms. So there was a 30-year old war, which cost the Sri Lanka economically, politically, and whatever way possible. And therefore, thankfully, it ended in 2009 militarily. But it was only, unfortunately, absence of war, but not actual peace, because people's grievances were not addressed. So after the end of 2009, the war, they were trying to the government, where the institutionalized racism is part of the policy, were trying to find another enemy. So where the Muslims, the second minority, became the next enemy, and that is why started off. And this, unfortunately, the tempo increased after the attack in 2019 April, Easter bomb attack. So after that, the demonization of the community started, and a lot of problems were raised. So my contention is that why do we say it's racism? State institutional racism is number one. It has a history behind it. It did not happen. This forced cremation did not happen now, right? Number two is there is no scientific basis. If there was a scientific basis, it could have been justified. The rationale could have been justified, and Muslim community would have willingly accepted the ruling that cremation is the only policy. No, it did not happen that way. There is no basis. Number three is this has been used. The government of Sri Lanka, through its some sections of the racist media, they were trying to promote, again, keep on promoting the idea among the people of Sri Lanka that there is in fact a medical reason, which was not right. So there was a mala fide, there was an intention of bad faith there as well. The fourth one is, as you know, the Sri Lankan situation, there's a lot of problems going on. There is a economic mismanagement, rule of law crisis, impunity crisis, and debt, to the high heavens. So all these problems are there, and the government wants diversion tactics, and this is clearly one, because the government that is in today was voted in on a majoritarian and a racist mandate, and about 2/3 majority came of they were elected on that. So therefore there was this issue of convincing the people. 1 year on after they were elected, there's widespread dissatisfaction with the government, economic and otherwise, as I told you. So therefore they needed a diversion tactic, and this is one of them clearly, and they wanted this actually to be one. So still, despite lot of evidence. Now what are the evidence? I'm sure you would have heard about the WHO guidelines. The second one is, very clearly, the world experts have spoken, right? We have Professor Malik Piris, one of the leading virologists in the world, a global expert on who actually was involved in locating that SARS, the virus as well. And there were a lot of other experts in Sri Lanka who actually clearly said that there is no danger, there is no risk in burial. It's a perfectly safe option. That included few of the government experts as well. The third one is the government appointed a team of experts to go into this when the community, when everyone was saying that it is safe. No, we will get the experts to this one. In fact, the first committee they had did not have experts. Now this was another committee they formed recently with all the leading experts, but they very clearly said that burial option is safe, and you got to afford the dignity to allow the community to have a dignified send off to their loved ones who passed away. So with all this, despite all this, they clearly, actually the health minister announced in the parliament recently that they can't accept it. It will contaminate water tables against medical advice. So they said that they will not be able to accept this. So therefore, the forced cremation policy continues. Now let me quickly tell you the other aspect of it. So therefore, if there is no medical purpose, it is racism, and also in terms of human rights, it's a gross violation of human rights, the right to practice one's culture and religion as per the country's constitution, as well as the ideals of the United Nations Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So this is not passed or promulgated just for the kick of it. It has a purpose, because the purpose is people who are born into a human family should not be treated discriminatory. No discrimination is possible on various grounds: racial, religious, sexual, or you can't discriminate. That's very clear. Even in the constitution it says. So despite all this, the government of Sri Lanka is on a stubborn policy of racism, which is trampling on the aspirations of a community, of sections of the community, both. Now you might wonder whether it's only for Muslims, but even Christians. There are loads of organization in Christian organization in Sri Lanka who has come forward now, and in fact, the 11 odd families who were affected initially, they filed a case. They filed a fundamental rights petition case in the Supreme Court. Now what happened was that included some of the Christian parties as well. What happened was, without assigning any reason, the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka held that they will not hear this petition, which means they refuse to hear those petitions. So even that avenue was closed for the Muslims, so which actually had no option other than to turn to the world at large, so the outside community. And did they speak? They did speak. Now you can see the United Nations 4 rapporteurs, famous on minority rights and various other sections, 4 UN rapporteurs. They actually wrote to the president of Sri Lanka to give up this policy. That did not happen. And Amnesty International wrote it. And also internally, one of the prestigious, at least the last remaining, the hope for the people who are facing gross discrimination is the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. And what happened was, even they clearly, unequivocally said that this is a gross violation of human rights. You must allow the communities to bury their dead, because that is allowed. But government is not acceding. So in this case, as I was trying to tell someone, you can only wake up a person who is sleeping. But if you are feigning sleep, if you want to show that you are sleeping but you are not actually, you can't wake him up. So it is in that situation, my dear brothers and sisters and friends in humanity, that the Sri Lankan government is now. So the government is consistently and stubbornly following a policy of state-sanctioned discrimination, state-sanctioned racism, and also a policy just to survive politically. They are using the Muslims and the Christians as a political tool to divert attention from the main issues in hand. So finally, what I want to tell you is that I'm sure most of you in US and also across the world must have known this meme, in post 9/11, after the in the aftermath of 9/11, when the Muslims are facing a lot of discrimination at airports and the airlines, there was a meme that came up, which is called the dying while flying. Flying while Muslim, file while Muslim. Now in Sri Lanka, the meme has changed. A new meme has emerged, and that is what is called the dying while Muslim. So this is the unfortunate situation we are in Sri Lanka, where the Muslims, actually the government of Sri Lanka is playing politics over dead bodies, right? It happened in terms of remembrance with regard to the Tamils recently. They actually demolished a memorial which was remembering their dead, and in the case of Muslims, they were actually trying to take away this one. So finally, what I want to tell you is this case of cremation. So what is being cremated in Sri Lanka is not the dead bodies, but what is cremated is the human rights of the living as well. So, my dear brothers and sisters, as Mahatma Gandhi rightly said, that always the greatness of a country is measured by how they treat the vulnerable, and which means the minorities among them. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, Muslims and Christians are facing a lot of discrimination, and the latest one is this forced cremation policy. So we actually appeal to the world at large. So you can come forward. In UK, we have this Muslim Council of Britain having come forward to take the Sri Lankan government to the United Nations Committee on Human Rights, and there are a lot of initiatives being done in US as well by the Islamic Center for the North America social justice things, and we have this Justice for All by Imam Mujahideen. A lot of things are happening all over every capital in the world. So we need to raise awareness and bring this to the attention of all world leaders, that to hold the government to account, not the people. People have been basically being used, as a bait by the government to sell. So it is the government that should be held to account. We appeal to everyone all over the world, our brothers, sisters, all over in humanity, to raise this awareness more and more, and ensure that enough, uh, enough heat created, so that the government of Sri Lanka will be held to account for the gross violation of human rights of sections of their humanity. So thank you very much. We will go for questions, and I will be too happy to answer the questions. And once again, I thank you very much, the Islamic Council of Center for of North America, for having invited me to share my thoughts. Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you so much, Brother Luqman Haris, for that informative information. We hope everyone enjoyed and took benefit. Our next speaker and last one for today is Brother Rizwan Maulana, who's based here in the US, in the state of Maryland. He's the executive director of Sri Lankan American Voice for Equity, or SAVE. He's also the organizer for Sri Lankans United USA. He's also a civil rights activist, and previously he was the executive director for the Council of American Islamic Relations CARE for Maryland and Virginia. And he's also a former member of the board for ACLU Maryland. So without further ado, we call Brother Rizwan Maulana to the stage.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على رسول النبي الكريم الحمد لله رب العالمين بسم الله قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري وعلى عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. May I take a moment to thank ICNA Center for Social Justice for arranging this webinar and other such events. ICNA has done some wonderful work in North America, and this was one of the things Dr. Zahid, when he found out that things were happening in Sri Lanka, he personally contacted us to arrange this webinar. Thank you for ICNA Center for Social Justice. I also would like to thank some of the Buddhist clergy. You know, there are good people in our community. The Buddhist clergy who are in America, especially, who is like Reverend Uparatna from the Maryland Temple. And there are other Buddhist clergy in Sri Lanka and outside, and lots of decent Sri Lankan minority communities and Buddhist communities who have really voiced their opinion and come up against this heinous act. I also would like to thank the Jewish and the Christian faith-based organization here in the United States and overseas who have voiced their objections to this thing. So, taking all this into consideration, as Brother Lukman Haris said, it's hard to wake up somebody who's feigning sleep. Nonetheless, we will keep trying. As Muslims, we are born and we are guaranteed of just one thing that is certain in our lives. We all know that. We are not wealth, nor fame, or glory. There's only one thing that we all work towards with certainty, and that is death. That is what is assured for us, as mentioned in the Holy Quran, in Surah Ali Imran, Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. Everyone will taste death. Every soul shall taste death. So from the moment we are born, we are preparing for death, an honorable death, as we can, especially as we get older. We even plan on where to be buried. And if we are blessed to perform Hajj, we save the 2 pieces of the ihram cloth to be used as our shroud. We prepare. Like any good business plan, we prepare and we have an exit strategy. An exit, we earnestly pray, that is not only honorable, but minimally painful to our beloved ones. A death that will not be traumatizing to our progeny. A legacy that will not go up in flames. It's good to know that almost a third of the entire world's population are Muslims. Of the approximately 2 billion Muslims of the world, just 2 million of them live on this tiny little island called Sri Lanka. History recounts that we Muslims have been living in Sri Lanka for more than 10 centuries, generally in peaceful circumstances and coexistence with the other religious and ethnic communities that make up Sri Lanka's vibrant social fabric. Many of us come from Arab origin, some from India, some from North Africa, and some from the Malayan Peninsula. We are hardworking, self-reliant, and religious people who come from all walks of life. But whether we are traders, professionals, or daily wage earners, we disproportionately contribute to the prosperity and welfare of this country through our thriving businesses, diverse charitable organizations and endeavors, and historical commitment to an united Sri Lanka. We have never asked for a separate state or handouts from the Sri Lankan government. I just have it's also good to know that Sri Lanka is a remittance economy, basically. Basically, Sri Lanka depends on remittances from foreign workers. Approximately 8.2% of its GDP and equivalent to 63% of all goods exports in remittances from foreign workers. In essence, remittance provide a larger share of foreign exchange earnings than the three largest export industries combined in Sri Lanka. The number one foreign exchange earnings come from these workers in the Arab countries mostly, and 10th of its population work outside the country, and mostly in Muslim countries in the Middle East and Malaysia. Isn't that ironic? But something's amiss on this resplendent island of Sri Lanka. There is a burning issue fueled by Islamophobia, as Brother Haris just mentioned, promoted by Sinhala hardline Buddhist extremists. The earthly paradise is now foul with the smell of Muslims cremated against their dying wishes and most cherished religious beliefs. Our folks are running scared. They are scared even to seek medical help. Some in the outskirts are secretly burying their dead in their land without even informing they are ill. They are mortally scared to go to the hospital. They fear they will be falsely diagnosed with COVID and then spirited away to an unknown camp far away. Such fears are not unfounded. Unfortunately, just a couple of weeks ago, to cite an example close to home, a member of my wife's family checked into a hospital in Colombo 5 for her confinement, excited for the arrival of their first baby. When they checked in, she and her husband were required, even though they had no symptoms at all, to be tested for COVID. The test came out as positive, which they feared it would, being a Muslim. The husband was immediately moved to a camp more than 100 miles away. And the mother, they told the mother she cannot give birth in this hospital. But the gynecologist who was attending to her insisted that she should give birth, because otherwise it may be fatal for her. So no sooner the mother gave birth, she and the baby were carted away to a camp in a town called Angoda, far away from her loved ones. To this day, the father had not seen his son, and the mother is struggling to make ends meet because the facilities there do not provide her to do her motherly chores. Stories like this are too common. Not too long ago, a 20-month-old baby was taken to the children's hospital, and you know the story from Dr. Haris, what happened to that baby. Burnt, cremated, without the wishes and the permission of the parents. Babies and their parents are not the only victims of this madness. Last week, there was a death of an old lady from natural causes. The family was fearful that if they contacted the authorities, that they will take her away, and eventually she will be diagnosed with COVID. So with the aid of some of the villagers, they buried her close to a mosque. They did not tell anybody. It was a private ceremony. They buried her. But of course, there was an informant. And what happened was, the worst of their fears happened. Their loved one was dug up, and the body was summarily burned without testing, even without testing for COVID. With Muslims counting for most confirmed COVID cases according to the Sri Lankan government, in spite of the statistical improbability of this, it seems highly likely that many Muslims who died as a result of natural causes other than COVID have been burned in recent months against their last will and their most basic religious belief. To counter widespread condemnation of such gross violation of the basic human rights of its Muslim citizens, freedom of conscience and dignified treatment in death, the Sri Lankan government's feeble response is, comically, that burial is not permitted because their hand-picked experts believed that burial of COVID victims endangers the country's water supply. No other country but China, a communist totalitarian state that does not pretend to be a democracy, takes a similar position on the burial of COVID victims. In showing such indifference to the most fundamental human rights of its people and the global scientific consensus regarding the safety of burial of COVID victims, and following the lead of communist China, Sri Lanka, which prides itself as being the Asia's oldest democracy, seems to have entirely lost its way. Sad. Today, the COVID virus has given the Sri Lankan government and extremist hardline Sinhala Buddhist elements a license to burn Muslim bodies and violate their most basic rights in unprecedented ways. While anti-Tamil discrimination has a long history in Sri Lanka, forced cremation is the most recent and disturbing reflection of growing and unbridled Islamophobia there, which from 2010 onwards in particular has flourished with hundreds of documented incidents of discrimination against Muslims, but also against, not only against Muslims, but also against Christians and other religious minorities. There have also been organized campaigns of violence against Muslims and boycotts of Muslim businesses, especially in the wake of the 2019 Easter bombing attacks, for which Muslims have been held collectively responsible for the crimes of a deviant few. To say little of the enemy of the many countless insults and indignities Muslims face daily due to racism by the singular hardline Buddhist-dominated government and society. Hundreds of Muslims have been detained, often on questionable grounds, without access to counsel, for years and without any charges being filed against them. In Sri Lanka, with the tolerance and tacit approval of governmental authorities, the descent towards the country's latest human rights violations all started with incendiary anti-Muslim rhetoric and Islamophobic hate speech, then moved to anti-Muslim boycotts of Muslim businesses, and organized and sporadic violence. Such problems are accompanied by forced cremation today, and that's going on. For Tamils, the intensifying discrimination faced by Muslims in Sri Lanka today will serve as a troubling reminder of their own experience of discrimination and violence in Sri Lanka and where it can ultimately lead. For Sri Lankan Muslims, beyond the Tamil experience, Myanmar, where hardline extremist Buddhist elements aided the government to indulge in open genocide of Muslims, looms large, especially as the Sri Lankan government's alliance with extremist hardline Sinhala Buddhist elements continues unabated. So what can we all do? This is our story. So we can start with, contacting our senators, our congressmen and women, our civic rights leaders, and to call upon the international community to pressure the Sri Lankan government to immediately, I have 8 points here which we must remember. The first point being, they must ask the Sri Lankan government to immediately overturn the policy on forced cremation of COVID-affected Sri Lankans' bodies and respect the religious beliefs of non-Buddhist minorities to bury their dead. Number 2, protect the just aspirations and human rights of all Sri Lankans, including all minorities, their racial and religious differences, as per its obligation under the UN Charter of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also the provisions of the Constitution of the country. They must also make provisions of the law to ban hate speech, which is quite rampant in Sri Lanka. If you see the Facebook and other social media, you write something on behalf of the Muslims, somebody puts a pig, which has been done to many of our constituents here as well. Make provisions by law to ban hate speech, which has been in recent times to many attacks, including on religious places of worships, particularly belonging to Muslims and Christians, initiated by extremist elements of the Sinhala Buddhist clergy and some extremist groups. Number 4, they need to apply the law of the land without discrimination and arrest the culprits who have been responsible for committing the acts of wanton destruction, vandalism, and indiscriminate attacks on places of worship and commercial establishments belonging to minorities. Take positive measures to dispel the sense of insecurity among the minorities as a direct and indirect result of the perceived majoritarian style approach adopted by extremist groups among the majority Sinhala Buddhist population, especially after the end of the war in 2009. They need to promote positive peace and harmony among all sections of the Sri Lankan people by stressing the multi-ethnic and multilingual character of the Sri Lankan nation. They should also foster and support interfaith and interethnic dialogue through training within and outside of Sri Lanka. This is what we ask for from the Sri Lankan government. And as Brother Haris mentioned, we have approached the government at very different levels, from the civic community there, and also from the ambassadors of the world and senators and parliamentarians. But there seems to be a sleep, which is a faint form of sleep, as mentioned by my brother here. So I call upon our communities and our leaders to put pressure on the government of Sri Lanka to stop this act. And we have families, we have folks living there in fear every day. Thank you, and may Allah bless you all.
Okay, thank you so much, Brother Rizwan, Maulana, and Brother Luqman Haris. Now we are open to questions now. So if anyone has any questions, they can type them up in the chat box on YouTube or on Facebook, and we can have them answer live. I think there was a question earlier about the main reasoning behind Sri Lanka's, persecution of Muslims. Is it just because of the recent terrorist attack that happened, or is it something that was happening even before that? So if one of you could answer that.
Yeah, can I answer?
Yes. But Luqman, maybe you want to move your camera a little bit to your left so we can see you. Yeah, there we go. Yep. So go ahead.
Yes. Now that's a good question. Actually, I did touch upon that areas as well. So as I was trying to stress on this, what is happening in Sri Lanka by way of forced cremation is not something which is a one-off exercise. It's a part of a well-orchestrated, part of the racist agenda of subsequent government in post-independent Sri Lanka. Because Sri Lanka had independence in 1948, and it was because of the Muslim leaders that Sri Lanka got independence. Because when the British offered independence to Sri Lanka, they wanted 3/4 of the council of the league voting for the independence resolution, and they did not have that. The majority community leaders did not have it. So it was because of the Muslim leaders who offered support, and therefore which led to the Sri Lanka gaining independence. So crucial support was given by the Muslims. Now what happened was, then the Tamils actually they had a lot of grievances. So this was starting off, by against the Tamil community. A lot of riots happened, and in 1956, the first communal riots happened in Sri Lanka against the Tamils. So what happened? It continued, and in 1983 there was big anti-Tamil riots in Sri Lanka, which paid a lot of Tamils, the professionals, the intellectuals, the minds. They immigrated to various Western capitals: America, UK, Canada, and New Zealand, and so on and so forth, Australia. So all this happened because of that one, and that started off a 30-year-old war against the the insurgents. But it affected mostly the Tamils, but affected the Muslims. We were chased out from the areas in north as well. So it was actually happening. So in 2009, this war ended, and therefore, despite the fact that the grievances were still unfulfilled, what happened was the there was a resurgence of what is called the majoritarian or the hate lobbies. They thought that by defeating the Tamil Tigers, who were the movement which fought the Sri Lankan government forces, they took it as against the Tamils. So they thought that firstly we had it we got the Tamils suppressed. Now we'll get to the next community, which is the Muslims. So that we started off a hate campaign. So various hate lobbies, which were actually had patron saints at the top of the government. The top government people were involved in sponsoring those type of hate lobbies. They started off a wave of campaign against the Muslims. So they did against the halal anti-halal campaign, and against the hijab and the burqa and the niqab of Muslims, and also various types of the other things, and boycott, as my brother mentioned, boycott of the businesses. And finally, when this all was going through, and a change of government in 2015 did not stop those those forces being operating. So in 2019, in April, the attack came up, and there are a lot of questions being asked: who was sponsoring that attack? Right? It was some of the misguided youth, but then there was a big bit of political conspiracy still not being found who was responsible for that, and there are a lot of things. So after that, the wave of Islamophobia accelerated, and we had lots of demonization by the press, everything, and then the government came up, voted on the majoritarian platform in 2019, end of 2019. So then the corona racism started, and we have demonization there as well. The Muslims were spreading the virus, and finally we ending with this forced cremation policy. So it's part of the state sanctioned policy. It's not one-off thing. One thing I need to again stress this: it is the government who is using racism as a political tool. People at the grassroots levels are living very happily in amity with other communities. Muslims have been having 10 more than 10 centuries, more than 10 centuries of amicable living with the Sinhalese people. So they are all good. But the issue is that government is using racism as a political tool. Thank you.
Okay, there's a question here about that. It seems like the UK Muslims. It says the UK Muslim community. Actually, I'll put it up so both of you can see it. It says it seems the UK Muslim community is more active on this issue. What type of actions you have taken in England or in other countries for Sri Lankan Muslims and Christians?
Can you hear me? I didn't hear you, but you can.
Yes. Can you see the question on the screen?
Yeah, you can hear me. Okay, that's a good question. Actually, not only UK Muslims, but even outside, we have US and Geneva. There are lots of things going on. So it's actually what we are trying to do here is our diaspora has been having a multi-pronged approach. One is to raise the awareness of the world, and that's what's happening. by way of demonstrations, right? Bringing, and by way of car parades. Sometimes because the coronavirus limitation, you can't have demonstration outside, so they were going into car parades, and also writing memos to the president, and also trying to convince the Muslim leaders, especially the OIC, Organization for Islamic Cooperation, to actually to rein in and do something. And they have, in fact, issued two very strong statement, OIC, to stop this. So things are still going on, but the most important thing is the greatest initiative that has happened in UK is the willingness of the umbrella body, the premier umbrella body in UK, which is the Muslim Council of Britain, which has come forward to help this cause. And they have put together a task force with including the Sri Lankan Muslim leaders in UK, as well as the wider community. And Alhamdulillah, there are lots of things going on to reach the Muslim leaders all over the world, to raise the awareness through webinars. And also the most important thing is to take the government to account, to the United Nations, Human Rights Committee, for the gross violation of human rights of the Muslims. So this is a very important thing. At the moment, things are going at a helmet pace, and a lot of things are being collected, and the case is going to be filed very soon, inshallah.
Okay, so we have one last question, and then we'll end it with this for Brother Rizwan. Is there anything particularly in the U.S. that's going on that people in the U.S. can be part of? I know there's a lot of activists in the U.S. that are interested, but they don't really know where to go, how to get involved. So is there something in particular in the U.S. that's happening that they can be part of?
Yes, actually, lots of organization in across the U.S., in Chicago, in Illinois, then in New York City, and then all the way up into Toronto and the Washington D.C. There are people gather and protest, and they contact their congressmen, their senators, and unfortunately there is a issue here. So till the 20th, until the next government comes in, there will be an hiatus. But there is activism going on here to bring awareness. And one must say that we don't want to waste our time, as my brother said. It's no point talking about the water table and it's okay scientifically. Science, it's a wastage of time to convince the government of Sri Lanka about science, because they know it. They are fully aware of what it is all about. So they have a firewall, which is their health minister, racist, open racist, and also there is a expert health department who try to sort of bring in new findings, and that's the firewall that the president has. Ultimately, what is shameful is the president of Sri Lanka, who lived in the United States for a better part of his life, and in the greatest democracy of the world, and for him to act like this, it's very shameful. It's really shameful.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. So inshallah, thank you everyone for joining us. So this recording will be available both on our Facebook pages as well as on our YouTube page, and we'll be putting it on our website as well, icnacsj.org. So please, everyone, make sure to share this recording with your family, friends, and other activists who may be interested in the topic, so we can get more awareness out there. And I'd like to thank both Brother Luqman and Brother Rizwan for joining us today. And hopefully we will have more future webinars on the topic with them. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.